Welcome to the premiere episode of The Science Table. On The Science Table, we're going to interview scientists and engineers and innovators and learn about the actual process of science in simple terms. We are in a very complex time in our history, and we have complex problems to work on. Hopefully, we can break this down into small pieces that we can all understand. We will be shooting each of our episodes from different man caves. It could be a nuclear control room, or even a rock legend's music castle. For our first episode, we will be shooting this in a genuine man cave, built by my friend and inventor Scotty Ziegler, with over 100,000 kilos of poured concrete shaped with his hands. And our topic? Energy, a candid debate about the choices that affect every person on this planet. With us, Dr. Frank Xu and Roland Kupers. Frank is an astrophysicist and energy advisor to Taiwan, and Roland is a physicist and former Shell Oil executive. He will be joining us all the way from the Netherlands via the new beam telepresence robot. Obviously, you guys are focused on energy and have amazing backgrounds in that area. What are the misunderstandings by people about energy? What are we doing that's wrong in terms of energy? And what are we doing that's right in terms of energy? And of course, I mean the future. What are we what's going to be happening 25, 50, and 100 years from now? And so, Roland, what's confusing me a little bit in this is what we decide to include in our collective price. Because when I think of nuclear, I look at the overhead. So I'm going to use the word overhead to mean anything other than the material itself. In the case of fuel, the overhead would be digging it out of the ground, transporting it. But in the case of wind, I think of giant machines that are constantly rusting and failing, and the overhead to replace them being very high, which tells me that there's some sort of problem. The energy overhead is so great that when amortized over time, I'm not sure those machines are worth it. I need to understand the economics at that level.
How do you even know that? I mean, are you investing in them? So, I mean, the point is, you have large power companies that do these investments at a certain scale, and you look at the economics of those projects. When you have to make investment decisions this year, which is, we're interested in what you can do now. So the point is actually getting on and doing something. Today, the cheapest source of non-fossil power is, certainly in Europe, and I believe it's true in many other places, is wind and solar. The fact is, in the real world, nuclear is now the most expensive source of power that exists.
Let me have you address that.
Yeah, I don't quite agree with Roland's analysis. Okay. I think the thing that he left out, he emphasizes power. And when you consider power, that is correct what he said. But when you consider energy, which is after all what goes into how much carbon dioxide you emit, you have to include load factor. Typically in countries like France or the United States, nuclear power plants are on more than 90% of the time. Wind is only on 30% of the time, onshore wind. Solar, 20% of the time. So you have to multiply those numbers that he mentioned by 5 and 3 respectively. And when you do that, they are not cheaper than nuclear power plants, not over the long run, even new nuclear power plants. In Europe, most of the cost is not in the cost of the panels, it's in the metal and in the installation. It's 75% of the cost.
Yes, but specifically, Roland made a point, which I agree with, in terms of the relative costs of things. And it seems to me that when you were responding to that, you're including in prices for things that are unrelated to the creation of the energy. And I want you to address that.
No, I addressed only the load factor.
Right.
Okay. How often do you use it? How often do you get to use it? I said you have to increase his cost by 3 when you consider wind, and by roughly
that's not
almost
true,
5.
Frank. Come on.
Well, that's where the disagreement occurs. I want to understand, just right there, let's focus on why we don't agree on how we calculate this.
Because people want to score points, all right? I'm trying to be as fair as I can, but obviously I'm also trying to score points, all right? Namely, you have to include usage. How often do you get to use it? When you don't use it, you have to burn fossil fuels. That's a choice. Or you have to use nuclear. Or you have to use hydro, all right? And those countries that have chosen nuclear and hydro, like France, like Sweden, have the lowest electricity costs. That's the fact, okay?
Okay, well, give a moment. Let's let Roland address this.
If you look at the price per kilowatt of onshore wind in Europe, it is less than half the cost of new nuclear per kilowatt. And that's just the cost and the tragedy in many ways of nuclear is that if you look back over the past 50 years, we've never actually built enough nuclear power plants for them to go down the cost curve. It's just possible that the current build program in China, where they're planning to build 100 nuclear power plants according to the same design, that actually has the potential of substantially cost-reducing nuclear. And if that was the case, then that would be a substantial contribution to the global commons that the Chinese made.
That said, with the incredible advantage nuclear has by far over mechanical and by far over chemical, it scares people. And for good reason. We're living on a planet where when we get these huge advantages, we also have these huge responsibilities and disadvantages when something goes wrong. And so, Frank, what are your thoughts on the safety, on the long-term implications of that safety on everyone else?
The three accidents that are traditionally pointed to are 3 Mile Island, where no one died. Very little radioactivity was released. Fukushima, which was initiated by a magnitude 9 earthquake and a 14-meter tsunami, and yet the plant survived all those. What happened were then mistakes that were made concerning how to keep the reactor, which was shut down, from boiling off its water, cooling water.
I don't care what caused the problem.
Yes.
We have the problem.
Right, so let's come to Chernobyl, right, where there were people killed, nowhere near what the anti-nuclear activists say, all right? And it's because it was fundamentally flawed in its design. All reactors today shut down safely. It's to keep them cool. That's the problem. So you have to
Why aren't we going to be stupid tomorrow?
Because you take humans out of the decision-making process.
That's my favorite answer.
You make it intrinsically safe so that the basic physics of the problem make it impossible to have really bad accidents. Accidents will always occur, all right? But they need not be dangerous.
Okay, let's
you have to weigh those dangers. You have to do a cost-benefit analysis. You have to weigh that against the certainty of the collapse of civilization if we keep burning fossil fuels the way we are.
Please speak to it for yourself. How do we get past the fact that people are scared of this?
You have to deal with the problems that you have. So today you cannot build nuclear power plants in developed countries. It'll take 10 to 15 years to get one licensed. It's also extraordinarily expensive. So, you know, what are we going to do? Sit on our hands and let the CO2 concentrations run up to 450 and 500 while we have some intellectual argument about whether nuclear on paper is better than something else? And, you know, clearly coal kills a lot more people than nuclear. That's absolutely true. But people aren't scared of coal and they're scared of nuclear. And, you know, we can debate until the cows come home whether that's a good or a bad thing. But the point is actually making a difference in the real world, provide energy at a reasonable cost and with a lower carbon footprint. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Roland. It was wonderful meeting you.
Absolutely, in this strange fashion. So, okay.